projects. And
Just a follow-up and a couple clarifications. I would agree with my colleague from Matsu that quickly we wrap up our legislative business and head out into our areas where we can hunt and fish and do a few things that we all like to do in Alaska, the better. But clearly we have a public policy issue here that we need to conclude. And I would agree with him also on bear hunting if we have planned in May. But with that, Mr. President, just a couple of quick things, just for reminders. I'd just like to read a quick quote out of I think the governor's comments yesterday at a meeting here he had. And it says, I think we tend to make too much about the personalities and less about the Constitution that we're governed by, he said. For me, it's about the Constitution that we're governed by. And I would agree with that, except we always refer to it as policy. It's a policy discussion, not a personality issue here. And it's a legitimate policy discussion. So in heading down that road dealing with a particular policy issue at hand, which is what we're talking about here today, and in the special session dealing with some energy projects, I want to try to clarify just a few things. There was also another quote by a colleague down the hall in another publication, direct quote, at least hopefully the news fellow got the direct quote correctly. It says these energy projects in there that people never asked for, that's ridiculous. According to that, but that I'll get into that. And then the size of the budget was also raised. So let me talk about a little bit about the energy projects that the people supposedly never asked for, which just flat is an inaccurate statement. What we're discussing here is roughly $404 million in Section 4 in the energy section of the current Senate CS of the capital budget, which is version T for those that happen to have access to it or want to check some of these things. There's $149 million of the spending in Section 4 that was requested by the governor. That's $149 million of the 404. That 449, 68 of it is the Stedman Hydro project. My colleague here sitting to my direct right, for his entire tenure, I think, pretty close to his entire tenure here in the Senate, has been pursuing the Stedman Hydro and working through the appropriating process to get appropriations for several years in a row on that project. And this year's the biggest one at 68. Going forward, it looks like there's going to be a request from the fiscal notes of $30 million a year for the foreseeable future, and then it may be a couple of billion to move that project forward. So that's 68 of the 149. There's $10 million in the Southeast Energy Fund. Again, these are all requested by the governor in his initial submission. $16 million for the Alaska Energy Authority standard programs like the bulk fuel upgrades, rural power system upgrades, and et cetera. $25 million in the AA round 4 grants. It's a renewable energy grants. Again, this is round 4, so this is nothing new. $5.5 million for the Alaska Gas Line Development Corporation funding. I think we're pretty much all concerned about gas to the rail belt, and we want to get some of that work completed on time. $25 million for the Alaska Housing Finance Weatherization Program. Clearly, that is a concern around the state. And then the Senate Finance Committee added 255 in additional items for a total of the 404. A few of these things about the Alaska Energy Association's Round 4 Renewable Grant Program that begins on page 101 of the bill. Let me give you a few highlights. These projects total $36.62 million. This is the exact amount for the exact projects that the administration's own energy authority, AA, recommended to be funded in the FY12 budget. So we took it, dollar and cents, exactly what they asked. The governor requested the legislature fund $25 million worth of these projects on December 15th, and we submitted his FY12, when he submitted his FY12 capital request, and you can also reference that in the backup, the governor's backup. The Senate CS took the Alaska Energy Authority's recommendations and funded the full $36.62 million. The fund is a balance of $6 million from previous appropriations, so the actual appropriation request for the full funding was $36.6, and the delta is, pushes it down to 30 million. So basically what we did is we took the full funding to make that a little bit clearer, I guess. This will be the fourth year of the funding for the renewable energy grant funds. The prior three physical appropriations totaled 150 million. In FY9 there was 100, then we did 25 and 10, then we did 25 last year. And you'll recall that the legislature funded the program at 50 last year, and the governor decided that he would prefer only 25 go forward, so we pulled 25 out. And now we could deal with some public notice issues. A public notice that the application period was opening for round 4 was issued in on July 21st, 2010. The application was due by September 15th, 2010. The governor requested 25 million in his 12 capital request on the 15th. AEA first notified the public of their final round 4 grant recommendations and delivered the recommendations to the legislature on the 26th of January of this year. The detailed backup for every project on the list became publicly available on the date and is published on the AEA's website. This is supposedly a lot of the projects that people don't have information on. A little Google search will pop them right up. AEA initially recommended 75 projects for funding in the FY12 total cost of $37.3 million. They have since revised the recommendations of 36.2, and these numbers are still in flux as they refine things and we work through the system, because there's a lot of dialogue going back and forth. And we're also trying to move the budget around a little bit to clarify the situation more for the public dissemination when we do the next CS. Then on Monday the 18th, the first day of the special session, the Senate Finance Committee directed Legislative Finance to provide the OMB, the Governor's Office of Management and Budget, detailed backup on every energy project in Section 4 of this bill. I personally did that, Mr. President. I asked my staff to run those systems and deliver it to OMB, and also any other information we may have on those projects. And as I recall, the direct quote was something like, we're not interested in hiding a peanut. If we have information, they can have it. Now, this is the backup out of the Capital Project Submission Information Systems, CAPSIS, which we're all familiar with, that is used by communities and legislators to request capital projects each year. And if you're not in CAPSIS, you can't get in the system to get an appropriation. The only way you can get into CAPSIS after the deadline, because there's only 2 co-chairs that have the ability to unlock that, which was done for one project this year by myself for an Anchorage request that inadvertently everybody thought somebody else had put it in CAPSIS. And I think everybody in this room is familiar with that project. Normally the Pacific project backup is not made public until a final bill passes and is transferred to the governor, which is a standard operating procedure. So the total project snapshot, which is known as TPS, reports for each project are transferred with the bill at the time, but we have, as of the first day of this session, turned over all that information. So all these projects can be re-reviewed. And last year, when the effort, well, let me back up a little bit to try to set the stage for this. Last year, we worked on a large piece of legislation that was called it GRETSI, trying to get the rail belt utilities all on the same page, and that unfortunately didn't move forward. So the group came together themselves and created the Alaska Rail Belt Cooperative Transmission Electric Company, or ARTEC, and just MLNP is not a member, by the way. They advocated for 90 million in regional rail belt projects as one package, and those are in the budget. And rather than go out and sit there and go through the ARTEC, the utilities group, and they all came together and then pick and choose which projects that they brought forward in a package. We took their entire package, Mr. President. think that they're probably better informed than we are on what is needed for the utilities to move forward with rail or with power line extensions and upgrades and generation upgrades. And that if the utilities sit down together in the region and agree on what needs to be done, and they've also had a integrated resource study done for that area, which helps us move forward, then we should take that public process that has been underway and honor it and move forward the entirety of the 90 million requested. So these projects, Mr. President, as some have referenced in the newspaper, were not drawn out of thin air. They were not invented by the Senate Finance Committee. We went into the CAPSA system, which is a standard operating procedure, and selected those projects after they had been brought forward to us either by the elected officials and or the governor, or in some cases directly by the communities. And as we all know, we try to work through our mayors, our assemblies, and our town councils, and respect their desires and wishes on what projects we should be moving forward and when. And with that, Mr. President, that kind of sums up a little bit of, or hopefully helps alleviate a little bit of misinformation concerning what projects are in there, but clearly the debate above that is on policy and the separation of powers between two branches of government. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Stedman.